Why was she sitting alone? That's the question no one asked. Not out loud anyway. In the forward operating base dining facility under fluorescent lights that hummed like insects trapped in glass, Chief Petty Officer Anna Sharma sat by herself. A small figure hunched over a data pad, fork moving, eyes focused. The room buzzed with voices, laughter, the clatter of trays, but around her table, silence. An invisible boundary no one crossed. Some people thought she was unfriendly, others thought she was arrogant. A few whispered she didn't belong here at all, but no one knew the truth, not yet. The air conditioning hummed. Someone dropped a tray across the room. Anna didn't flinch. She was reviewing power distribution schematics, her mind tracking electrical pathways like a map only she could read. This was her language: numbers, systems, logic. In a world of chaos, she found comfort in things that made sense, things that followed rules. Her fork moved automatically from tray to mouth. She barely tasted the food. Her world had narrowed to the screen in front of her, to the problem she was solving. That's when the shadows fell across her table. Three men, Marines, force reconnaissance. They moved like they owned the space, their boots heavy on the linoleum floor. The leader was Gunnery Sergeant Rex Thorne, built like a tank. Face carved from granite, he leaned over her table, knuckles brushing the metal surface. His two shadows, Corporal Diaz and Corporal Miller, fanned out on either side, a casual blockade, deliberate, practiced. "Well, look what we have here." Thorne's voice rolled out like gravel down a hill, loud, meant to be heard. "The Navy's new pet project." Anna's eyes didn't leave her screen. The schematic scrolled. Her finger traced a connection point. "All that top-level clearance," Thorne continued, playing to an audience that was starting to notice. "And what do they send us? A data clerk who probably gets a nosebleed climbing stairs." Diaz snickered. "Sharp. Mean. Heard she's some kind of signals wizard, Gunny, supposed to be integrating the new comms package." Thorne scoffed. The sound was pure contempt. He looked directly at Anna, waiting for her to look up. She didn't. "You know what we used to call signals wizards," he said. "Nerds, backroom boys, people who made sure the real warriors could talk to each other while they did the work. Now they give them a chief's anchor and a seat at the table." He gestured vaguely at her collar device, the trident insignia, the symbol that meant something to people who understood what it took to earn it, but Thorne wasn't looking at what it meant. He was looking at who was wearing it. Anna continued scrolling through her power distribution diagram, her expression unchanged. She registered their presence the way you register a change in air pressure before a storm, a data point, something to be noted but not reacted to, and that silence. It fed Thorne's frustration like oxygen feeds fire. He wanted something from her, a reaction, fear, anger, anything that would prove he still had power here. He got nothing. He nudged her tray with the back of his hand. The plastic cup wobbled, water sloshed. "You know the word as you came from the teams," Thorne said, leaning closer. His voice dropped to what he probably thought was quiet but carried across half the room anyway. "That's a good one, a real good one. They letting 5'0" computer jockeys wear the trident now. What a joke. The whole program's gone soft." Miller, emboldened by his Gunny's performance, chimed in. "Soft is right, Gunny. All this high-tech garbage. Drones and satellites. They're trying to take the fight out of the fighter. It's why we're losing our edge." "Exactly," Thorne boomed, straightening up. He was performing now, playing to the crowd that had gone quiet to watch. He pointed a thick finger at Anna's still-bowed head. "This is the problem, this right here. They think a line of code is a substitute for a burst from a rifle. They think a good signal means more than a good man with a bayonet." He paused, let the words hang in the air. His gaze swept the silent room like a searchlight looking for agreement. Then he said it, the thing he'd been building to. "You ask me, SEALs are worth nothing anymore. Nothing." The words landed like a slap. Someone sucked in a breath. The room seemed to contract. And then Thorne did something that changed everything. With a final, deliberate act of contempt, he backhanded her tray. It skittered across the table. Lukewarm stew splashed. Green beans scattered like shrapnel. The plastic cup overturned, water spreading in a dark stain across the metal surface, pooling around her data pad before dripping onto the floor. Drip, drip, drip. The only sound in a room that had stopped breathing. Anna didn't flinch. Slowly, so slowly it seemed rehearsed, she raised her head. But she didn't look at Thorne, her gaze fixed on a point just past his shoulder. Her face was a mask, placid, neutral, no anger, no fear, nothing he could grab onto. For 3 full seconds she remained perfectly still. The room counted those seconds in heartbeats. Then, with an economy of motion that was almost unnerving, she powered down her data pad, placed it carefully in its protective sleeve, and stood. She picked up the soiled tray, walked it to the disposal window, scraped the contents into the bin with the same methodical precision she'd used while eating, placed the tray on the rack, turned, and walked out of the dining facility, her footsteps even, measured, each one exactly the same distance apart. She never looked back, not at Thorne, not at the stunned faces, not at the spreading puddle of water still dripping from her table. She just left. And somehow, that silence was louder than any scream could have been. The door closed behind her, the room exhaled. Conversations started again, but they were different now. Uncertain, confused, because everyone had just watched something they didn't understand. They'd watched a woman be humiliated, publicly disrespected, and she'd responded with nothing. Some thought she was weak, too scared to fight back. Others weren't so sure. There was something about that walk, that perfect, measured calm. It reminded them of something they couldn't quite name. The stillness before an explosion, the quiet before a storm breaks. But what no one knew, what no one could have guessed in that moment, was what Anna Sharma was thinking as she walked down that hallway alone. She wasn't thinking about revenge. She wasn't planning violence. She was doing something far more dangerous. She was documenting. Part 2. What do you do when no one's watching? That's when you learn who someone really is. Back in the sterile confines of her private quarters, a small windowless box afforded by her security clearance level, Anna Sharma sat at her desk. The only sound was the quiet hum of her workstation's cooling fan, a patient, electronic heartbeat. There was no outburst here, no muttered curses, no fists slammed against bulkheads. Anna operated on a different frequency than most people. She placed the data pad on its charging cradle, opened a secure encrypted log file on her terminal. The cursor blinked, a patient green metronome waiting for input. Fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency, each keystroke deliberate. Incident log 2100 Zulu, 14 October. Location, DFAC Forward Operating Base Griffin. Personnel involved, Gunnery Sergeant R. Thorne, USMC, Corporal J. Diaz, USMC, Corporal T. Miller, USMC. She typed with dispassionate clarity, like she was transcribing lines of code in a flawed program. Because to her, that's exactly what this was, a bug in the system. An error that needed correction. Subject Thorne initiated verbal confrontation, accusatory language regarding declination of standards within naval special warfare. Direct quote, "SEALs are worth nothing." Physical action. Subject Thorne intentionally displaced personal meal tray, causing spillage. She paused. Her mind replayed the event, not emotionally, analytically. The angle of his arm, the velocity of the impact, the splash pattern of the water, it was all just physics. Measurable, quantifiable, predictable. She saved the file, then opened a new window. Her credentials granted her authorized access to the base's C4I network. Command, control, communications, computers, and intelligence. The backbone of modern warfare. She navigated to the security archives with the same calm precision she brought to everything. A few keystrokes. The feeds from the dining facility appeared. Multiple camera angles, time-stamped, indexed. She isolated camera 4, the one with the clearest view of her table. She scrubbed the timeline to the exact moment. 21:03 hours, 17 seconds, there it was. A silent, grainy movie of Thorne's arrogance and her own deliberate non-response. She watched it once, twice, making sure the angle was clear, that the audio would be recoverable, that there was no ambiguity in what happened. She bookmarked the footage, noted the timestamp, then initiated a secure transfer, triple redundant, encrypted. She named the file DFAC 140 CT2103Z Corroboration 01. She attached it to her log entry. Proof. An unbroken chain of custody. documentation before escalation. The rules were there for a reason. They were a governing system, and Anna knew how to operate within systems. Close the file, task complete. Her emotional state remained flat. The insult was irrelevant. The disrespect was a symptom of a systemic flaw. Thorne and his men were a bug in the code, a variable producing an undesirable output. The system required correction. With the report filed in her private archives, she stood, began to methodically strip out of her uniform, hung it precisely in her locker, changed into workout gear. The noise, the arrogance, the public display. It was all static. White noise obscuring the signal. She needed to recalibrate, to return to a place of pure clarity, and she knew exactly where to find it. Later that night, the combat dive training facility was a tomb. Concrete walls, still chlorinated water. The only light came from dim red safety lamps spaced along the walls, casting the deep end of the pool in an infernal glow. The air was thick with the chemical tang of treated water and silence. Anna moved through the empty locker room with ritualistic grace. She laid out her gear on a bench, low-profile rebreather, mask, fins, simple weight belt. Each piece was checked and double-checked. The hiss of the oxygen tank as she cracked the valve was a familiar whisper. This was her sanctuary, a place where the chaotic variables of the surface world were nullified by the immutable laws of pressure and buoyancy. She slipped into the water. The cold was a sharp, clean shock that banished the last vestiges of the dining facility's stale air. She didn't splash, she simply submerged, a seamless transition from one element to another. With a few powerful, efficient kicks, she descended. Down into the deep end where the red lights couldn't quite reach, where the pressure built against her eardrums, where the world above became irrelevant. Here, in the dark water, there was only her breathing. The mechanical rhythm of inhale and exhale through the rebreather. The quiet pop and equalization as she descended deeper. The gentle pull of neutral buoyancy as she hovered, weightless, in the middle distance between surface and bottom. She closed her eyes, let her body remember. This was where she'd been forged, not in classrooms, not in briefing rooms, in water, in darkness, in cold that tested your resolve and pressure that revealed your limits. She'd earned her trident down here, in pools like this, in oceans colder than this, in missions that never made the news. The water didn't care about your gender. It didn't care about your size. It cared about your competence, your control, your ability to manage fear and execute under pressure. And Anna had always been exceptional at managing pressure. She began her routine, underwater calisthenics, slow, controlled movements in the resistance of the water, each motion deliberate, building strength without burning oxygen. This was meditation for her, not sitting cross-legged on a mat. This, moving through water in darkness, feeling her body respond, feeling her mind clear. The encounter in the dining facility drifted away like silt disturbed and then settled. It became just another data point, another mission parameter to account for, nothing more. She completed her routine, ascended slowly, safely, breaking the surface with barely a ripple. The air felt almost too warm after the water's embrace, too complicated. She removed her mask, breathed deep, climbed out, began the methodical process of cleaning and stowing her gear. Tomorrow she would continue her work. She would integrate the new communications package. She would solve the signal propagation problems. She would do her job with the same precision she brought to everything. And the incident with Thorne, that was filed, documented, in the system now, like a program running in the background, waiting for the right conditions to execute. Because that's what most people didn't understand about Anna Sharma. She didn't need to react immediately. She didn't need to prove herself in the moment. She simply needed to be right. And she always made sure she was right before she acted. As she walked back to her quarters through the quiet base, the stars overhead were brilliant. No moon, just stars, distant, cold, burning with a light that took years to reach Earth. Anna looked up at them for a moment, thought about distance, about time, about how things that seemed far away could still affect you, how light from a dead star could still illuminate the present. Then she lowered her gaze and kept walking. The base was quiet. Most personnel were asleep. The world felt empty. But Anna had never been afraid of emptiness. She'd learned long ago that sometimes the emptiest spaces were where you found the most clarity, where you could hear the signal through all the noise. And right now, the signal was clear. She had work to do, problems to solve, a system to trust. The rest would unfold according to its own logic. She just had to wait, be patient, let the process work. She'd set something in motion tonight, something quiet, something most people wouldn't notice until it was too late. But there was something Thorne and his men didn't know yet, something they couldn't have known, and when they found out, everything would change. Part 3. Do you know what real power looks like? It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. 3 days passed, 3 days of routine. Anna worked in the operations center, her fingers dancing across holographic keyboards, solving problems that most people didn't even know existed. Signal propagation, satellite relay timing, encryption protocols, the invisible infrastructure that kept modern warfare functioning. She was good at it, better than good. She was exceptional, and people were starting to notice. Not because she told them. She never told anyone anything about herself. But results speak louder than words. Systems that had been glitching suddenly worked. Communications that had been dropping suddenly held. Problems that had stumped entire teams got solved in hours when Anna looked at them. The Marines in the operations center started giving her a wider berth. Not out of respect exactly, more like uncertainty. She was an unknown variable in their equation, small, quiet, seemingly fragile, but something about her didn't add up. The way she moved through the space with absolute confidence, the way she never seemed rushed or flustered, the way senior officers would defer to her judgment on technical matters without question. It created a cognitive dissonance they couldn't quite resolve. And then there was the trident on her uniform, that symbol everyone recognized but few truly understood. It nagged at them, a question they couldn't answer. How? How had someone who looked like her earned that? Thorne and his men had gone quiet. They didn't come near her, didn't acknowledge her. It was like the dining facility incident had never happened. They moved through their routines, talking loud in the hallways, laughing at their own jokes, maintaining the same swagger they'd always had. But there was something underneath now, a tension, an awareness. They knew she'd walked away. They knew she'd said nothing. And somehow that made them nervous. Because in their world you fought back immediately or you were weak. But Anna had done neither. She'd simply left, and that didn't fit the pattern. That was outside their programming. On the morning of the fourth day, Anna was called to the battalion commander's office. The summons came through official channels, a formal email, terse. CPO Sharma, report to Colonel Sterling's office at 900. That was it. No context, no explanation. Anna read the email once, noted the time, returned to her work. At 8:45 she secured her terminal, stood, smoothed her uniform, walked calmly across the base to the battalion headquarters building. Her steps even, measured. Inside, the building was cooler. The air conditioning working overtime against the desert heat outside. Linoleum floors polished to a high shine. Walls decorated with unit photographs and campaign streamers. The smell of coffee and paper and stress. The battalion sergeant major's office was just outside the commander's. He looked up as Anna approached, a hard man with gray hair and eyes that had seen everything twice. CPO Sharma, he said, not friendly, not unfriendly, just weighing her. The colonel's expecting you, go ahead in. Anna nodded, knocked twice on the door, sharp, professional. Enter, came the voice from inside. She opened the door and stepped into what felt like a courtroom. Colonel Sterling sat behind his desk, Marine, late 40s, face weathered by deployment and desert sun. But it was the other people in the room that made Anna's tactical awareness spike. To the colonel's left sat a woman in navy dress blues, commander's rank, Judge Advocate General's Corps, a lawyer. Behind them, standing near the wall, was the battalion's senior enlisted advisor. And sitting in chairs arranged in front of the colonel's desk, looking like they'd rather be anywhere else, were Thorne, Diaz, and Miller. The three Marines sat at attention, but their eyes were everywhere, nervous, defensive, like animals that smell smoke but can't see the fire yet. Chief Petty Officer Sharma, Colonel Sterling said. His voice was flat, controlled. Have a seat." He gestured to an empty chair positioned slightly apart from the Marines. Anna sat straight back, hands folded in her lap, face neutral. She didn't look at Thorne, didn't acknowledge him at all. The colonel opened a folder on his desk. "4 days ago, there was an incident in the dining facility," he began. "Gunnery Sergeant Thorne and his Marines have reported that you assaulted them." The words hung in the air. Anna didn't react, didn't move. "According to their statement," the colonel continued, reading from the folder, "you became aggressive when they attempted to engage you in conversation. You made threats, and when Gunnery Sergeant Thorne tried to leave, you attacked him, struck Corporal Miller in the face, created a disturbance that endangered personnel." The colonel looked up from the folder, looked directly at Anna. "These are serious allegations, Chief. Assault, threatening behavior, creating a hazardous environment. If substantiated, these charges would end your career. Do you understand?" Anna met his gaze. Her voice when she spoke was quiet, steady. "I understand, sir." "Do you have anything to say about these allegations?" Anna's eyes didn't waver. "May I show you something, sir?" The colonel raised an eyebrow, glanced at the JAG officer. She nodded slightly. "Proceed," he said. Anna stood, moved to the colonel's desk. From her uniform pocket she produced a small encrypted drive. "Sir, with your permission, I'd like to access the security camera footage from the dining facility. Timestamp 21:03 hours, 14 October, camera 4. The colonel gestured to his computer. Anna inserted the drive. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with the same calm precision she brought to everything. The screen flashed. The JAG officer moved closer to see. On the monitor, grainy black and white footage appeared. The dining facility, multiple tables, personnel eating, and there in the lower right quadrant of the frame was Anna's table. The colonel leaned forward. They watched in silence. They saw Anna sitting alone, focused on her data pad. They saw the 3 Marines approach. They saw Thorne lean over her table. Even without audio, you could see his mouth moving, see him gesturing, see the aggressive posture. They saw Anna not reacting, just sitting, reading, ignoring them. Then they saw Thorne's hand move, the backhand that sent her tray skittering across the table, the spill, the mess. And they saw Anna's response, or rather her non-response, the slow, deliberate movements. The calm walk to the disposal window, the exit, no aggression, no threats, no assault. The colonel's face hardened. He looked at Thorne. "Gunnery Sergeant, is this the incident you reported?" Thorne's face had gone pale, his jaw worked. "Sir, that's not the whole story. After that, in the hallway, the colonel's voice went cold. "So you're saying there was a second incident? One you failed to mention in your initial report." Thorne realized his mistake, started to backtrack. "Sir, Chief Sharma," the colonel interrupted. "Is there footage of this second incident?" Anna's voice remained neutral. "Yes, sir. Multiple angles. Would you like to see it?" Part 4. Sometimes the truth doesn't roar. Sometimes it whispers. And sometimes that whisper is more terrifying than any shout could ever be. Anna pulled up the second video file. The colonel's office had gone completely silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to hold its breath. The screen flickered. This footage was from a hallway camera, wider angle, lower resolution, but clear enough. Time stamp, 21:07 hours, 4 minutes after the dining facility incident. The hallway was empty. Then Anna appeared in frame, walking with that same measured pace, heading toward her quarters, her expression unreadable even on the grainy footage. 10 seconds later, 3 figures entered from the opposite end of the hallway. Thorne, Diaz, Miller, moving fast, purposeful, they were following her. The colonel leaned closer to the screen. "Chief, enable audio," he ordered. Anna tapped a key. The sound quality was poor, echoing, but you could hear boots on linoleum, heavy breathing, and then Thorne's voice, loud and aggressive. "Hey, we're not done here." Anna stopped, turned slowly, faced them. The 3 Marines closed the distance, got into her space. Thorne was talking, the audio caught fragments. "Think you can? Disrespect. Marines, teach you." Diaz and Miller had fanned out, blocking the hallway. Classic intimidation posture, 3 on 1. No witnesses, no one to intervene. Anna stood perfectly still. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, so quiet the microphone barely caught it. "This conversation is over, please step back." "Step back," Thorne laughed. The sound was ugly. "You don't give orders here, sweetheart, you're nothing. A fraud wearing a trident you didn't earn, and we're gonna," he reached out, put his hand on her shoulder. Not gently, a push, aggressive, meant to move her, to establish dominance. And that's when everything changed. What happened next took 3 seconds, maybe less. But to everyone watching that video, it seemed to unfold in slow motion. Anna's hand moved, fast, precise. She redirected Thorne's arm, caught his wrist, applied pressure to a nerve cluster that made his entire arm go dead. His knees buckled slightly. Before he could react, she'd rotated his arm into a lock position. Not violent, just controlled, mechanical, like she was adjusting a piece of equipment. Thorne's face registered shock, then pain, then something else. Fear. Miller lunged forward, tried to grab her. Anna pivoted. Still holding Thorne's wrist with one hand, she struck Miller in the shoulder with the other. Not a punch, a nerve strike, precise, surgical. Miller's arm dropped like someone had cut the strings. He stumbled back. The whole thing was maybe a second, maybe less. Diaz froze, caught between charging and running. Anna made the decision for him. She released Thorne's wrist. Gave him a controlled push. Not hard, just enough to send him off balance into Diaz. Both Marines stumbled, caught each other, stared at her, and Anna stood there, centered, calm, both hands at her sides, not breathing hard, not even looking particularly interested. "The conversation is concluded," she said. Her voice was soft, almost gentle. "Do not approach me again." She turned, started walking. After 3 steps, she paused, looked back over her shoulder. "This hallway has video coverage, audio capable. This incident has been recorded. Have a good evening, gentlemen." Then she continued walking, disappeared around a corner, left 3 Marines standing in a hallway trying to understand what had just happened. The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in the colonel's office was absolute. It was a dense, suffocating silence filled with the death of a lie. Thorne, Diaz, and Miller were frozen, their faces ashen. All the swagger, all the confidence, all the smugness had evaporated, replaced by the cold terror of being caught in an undeniable truth. Colonel Sterling slowly sat back in his chair. He looked at the 3 Marines for a long moment. His expression wasn't rage, it was something worse. Disappointment, deep, profound, the kind that cuts deeper than anger ever could. "So let me understand this correctly," the colonel said. His voice was quiet, dangerous. "You 3 confronted Chief Sharma in the dining facility. You insulted her service. You insulted her branch. You physically destroyed her meal. Then you followed her into a hallway, cornered her, attempted to physically intimidate her, and when she defended herself using minimal force, you came to me with a story about how she assaulted you. Is that accurate?" None of the Marines spoke. What could they say? The footage didn't lie. The timeline didn't lie. The evidence was irrefutable. The JAG officer spoke for the first time. Her voice was crisp, professional. "Colonel, I'd like to note for the record that Chief Sharma's response in the hallway was textbook defensive engagement. Controlled, proportional, non-excessive. She could have seriously injured all 3 of these men. She chose not to. Instead, she issued a clear verbal warning. Disengaged. And documented the incident. This is exactly how personnel are trained to respond to aggressive confrontation." She looked at Anna with something like respect. "Chief, did you file an incident report?" Anna nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Immediately following the dining facility incident. Supplemental report filed after the hallway encounter. Both reports are in the secure personnel database." The JAG officer turned to the colonel. "Sir, with your permission, I'd like to pull those reports." "Do it," the colonel said. The officer moved to the computer. A few keystrokes, her eyebrows rose. "Sir, Chief Sharma's reports are thorough, time-stamped, include video evidence attachments. Chain of custody is documented." She also noted that she took no physical action until Gunnery Sergeant Thorne initiated physical contact. Self-defense only, no escalation. The colonel looked at Anna. Really looked at her, seeing her for the first time. This small, quiet woman who had just systematically dismantled 3 trained Marines without breaking a sweat, without losing her composure, without even raising her voice. "Chief Sharma," he said, "are you a SEAL?" The question hung in the air. Anna's face remained neutral. My personnel file is classified at a level above your clearance, sir. What I can confirm is that my trident is earned. I have been properly vetted and assigned to this command by Naval Special Warfare Command. All credentials and qualifications are documented and verified. Translation: yes, but I can't tell you the details. The colonel understood. He'd been in this business long enough to recognize the signs, the calm under pressure. The precise, controlled movements, the situational awareness, the ability to de-escalate even while defending yourself. These weren't skills you learned in a classroom. How long have you served? He asked. 14 years, sir. Combat deployments? 7, sir. 7 deployments, 14 years. And she looked like she could be someone's daughter, someone's little sister, but she wasn't. She was a weapon. A finely tuned, highly trained, exceptionally disciplined warrior, who these Marines had mistaken for an easy target. The colonel turned his gaze back to Thorne. When he spoke, his voice was ice. Gunnery Sergeant Thorne, do you understand what you've done? Thorne's mouth opened, closed, no words came out. You assaulted a fellow service member. You filed false charges. You attempted to intimidate a superior non-commissioned officer. You brought dishonor to your uniform, your unit, and your corps. And you did it because you made an assumption. A stupid, arrogant assumption based on nothing but your own prejudice. The colonel stood. The Marines instinctively came to attention. All 3 of you are hereby confined to your quarters pending an Article 15 hearing. You will not speak to each other. You will not speak to anyone about this incident. You will surrender your weapons and restricted area badges to the sergeant major. Is that understood? Yes, sir, they mumbled, broken, defeated. Get out of my office. They fled. The door closed behind them. The colonel looked at Anna. His expression had changed. The hardness was still there, but now there was something else, respect, real respect. Chief Sharma, I owe you an apology. Part 5. What does justice look like? Sometimes it's not about revenge. Sometimes it's about restoring balance, about making sure the system works the way it's supposed to. Anna stood in the colonel's office, the weight of his words settling around her like dust after an explosion. Chief Sharma, I owe you an apology. She met his gaze, didn't smile, didn't nod, just stood there, waiting. The colonel continued. When those 3 Marines came to me with their story, I should have investigated more thoroughly before calling you in. I should have checked the camera footage myself. I should have verified their account. Instead, I made an assumption. I assumed 3 Force Recon Marines wouldn't lie to me, and I assumed, he paused, chose his words carefully. I assumed they were telling the truth about someone who didn't look like a typical operator. That was a failure of leadership, and I apologize. Anna's voice was quiet when she spoke. Sir, you followed procedure. You called all parties in for questioning. You asked to see evidence. The system worked. That's all that matters. The JAG officer stepped forward. Chief, may I ask why you didn't report the initial incident to your chain of command immediately? Anna turned to her. I did, ma'am. I filed a detailed report in the secure database. But I did not push it up the chain of command because I was waiting to see if the behavior would escalate or if it was an isolated incident. When they followed me into the hallway, I had my answer. Then I filed the supplemental report and flagged it for command review. So you were documenting a pattern, the JAG officer said. Something like admiration crossed her face. Yes, ma'am. And you never confronted them, never escalated, never retaliated. No, ma'am, that would have been inappropriate. The colonel shook his head slowly. Chief, most people in your position would have handled this very differently. Most people aren't trained to operate the way I operate, sir. It wasn't arrogance, it was just fact. The colonel sat down, gestured for Anna to sit as well. She did. Can I ask you something off the record? He said. Anna nodded. Those moves in the hallway. That level of control, that's not basic self-defense training. What are you? Anna was quiet for a moment, choosing what she could say, what she was allowed to say. I'm someone who has been trained to enter spaces where I'm not supposed to exist, to operate in environments where failure means death, to control situations without using excessive force because noise attracts attention. And I'm someone who understands that the real enemy isn't the person in front of you. It's chaos. It's disorder. It's systems breaking down. She paused. Those Marines didn't see me. They saw what they expected to see, Size, gender, a target, they didn't look deeper. People rarely do. The colonel was quiet, processing. Finally, he said, "What do you want to happen to them?" It was a test. Anna knew that. He was asking if she wanted blood, if she wanted them destroyed, if she wanted revenge. "I want them to understand that the uniform they wear requires dignity," Anna said. "I want them to learn that strength isn't about size or volume. And I want them to know that there are consequences for abusing power. But I don't want their careers ended. I want them corrected." The colonel smiled. It was a small, tired smile. "You know, Chief, most people would want me to throw the book at them. Most people aren't focused on making the system better, sir. They're focused on making themselves feel better. Those are different goals." The JAG officer looked at the colonel. "Sir, I recommend a formal Article 15 hearing. Loss of rank, forfeiture of pay, formal reprimand in their permanent records, and mandatory retraining on military bearing and professional conduct." The colonel nodded. "Agreed, and I want it public, full formation. Every person on this base needs to see that this behavior will not be tolerated." He looked at Anna. "With your permission, Chief, I'd like to use this as a teaching moment. Not to humiliate them, but to make it clear that we're better than this, that this command is better than this." Anna considered, then nodded. "Permission granted, sir." The meeting ended. Anna left the headquarters building and walked back across the base. The sun was high now, heat radiating off the concrete. She walked through it like she walked through everything. Steadily, calmly, people passed her. Some nodded. A few saluted, recognizing her rank. Most just walked by, unaware that the small woman in the Navy uniform had just fundamentally changed the power dynamics of the entire forward operating base. Back in the operations center, her workstation was exactly as she'd left it. Data streams waiting, problems to solve. She sat down, pulled up her current project, satellite signal optimization, the kind of problem that required focus and precision, the kind of problem that made sense. Commander Evans, her direct supervisor, appeared beside her desk. "Chief," he said quietly, "word travels fast around here. I heard about the meeting." Anna didn't look up from her screen. "Yes, sir." "Are you okay?" Now she looked at him. "I'm fine, sir. If you need time." "I don't need time. I need to finish optimizing this satellite relay before the next mission window opens in 4 hours." Evans studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Understood, carry on." But before he walked away, he said one more thing. "Chief, for what it's worth, I'm glad you're on our team." Anna's fingers paused on the keyboard just for a second. "Thank you, sir." Then she returned to work, because that's what she did, that's who she was. Not someone who needed validation, not someone who sought recognition, just someone who did the job, solved the problems, made the systems work. And the next morning, when the sun rose over forward operating base Griffin, everyone would learn just how powerful silence can be, how devastating calm can be, how sometimes the quietest person in the room is the most dangerous, not because of what they do, but because of what they don't have to do. Because they understand something most people never learn: true strength doesn't need to prove itself. It simply is. Part 6. How do you change a culture? One moment at a time, one decision at a time, one person standing up and saying, "This is not who we are." The next morning the sun rose sharp and hot over forward operating base Griffin. The entire command was assembled on the main parade ground. Every unit, every branch, Marines, Navy, Air Force, Army support personnel, over 1,000 people standing in formation. Uniforms pressed, boots shined. The air smelled of dust and diesel fuel. There was tension in the ranks. Everyone knew something was coming. The grapevine had been working overtime. Whispers about an incident, about 3 Marines, about a Navy chief, but no one knew the full story. Not yet. Colonel Sterling stood at the podium. The base-wide address system amplified his voice so it carried to every corner of the parade ground. "This morning," he began, "we are here to address a failure." His words landed like hammer blows. A failure of discipline, a failure of character, and a failure of leadership. The formation was silent. 1,000 people barely breathing. The colonel continued. "4 days ago, 3 Marines under my command engaged in conduct that dishonored themselves, their unit, and their service. They harassed a fellow service member. They insulted that person's branch and capabilities. They destroyed that person's property. And then, when that service member declined to engage with their behavior, they followed that person into a hallway and attempted to physically intimidate them. You could have heard a pin drop. When their victim defended themselves using minimal, controlled force, these three Marines then filed false charges. They lied to their chain of command. They attempted to manipulate the system to punish someone whose only crime was refusing to be bullied. The colonel's voice grew harder. Honor, courage, commitment. These are not just words we stencil on our walls, they are the standards we are sworn to uphold. And three Marines under my command failed to meet those standards. They brought dishonor upon themselves and upon their unit. He paused. Let the weight settle. Then, Gunnery Sergeant Thorne, Corporal Diaz, Corporal Miller, front and center. Three figures detached from the Marine formation. Moved with stiff mechanical precision to the front of the parade ground. They halted before the colonel, stood at attention, but their eyes were fixed on the horizon, unable to meet the gaze of hundreds of people now staring at them. The colonel read the formal charges, detailed their punishment, loss of rank, forfeiture of pay, formal reprimands, reassignment to non-leadership duties. It was a public professional execution, necessary, brutal, final. But then the colonel did something unexpected. Chief Petty Officer Sharma, he called, front and center. A murmur rippled through the formation. Anna emerged from the Navy detachment. Her stride was calm, measured, each step exactly like the one before. She marched to the front, halted beside the three disgraced Marines, rendered a crisp salute to the colonel. He returned it. Then he addressed the entire formation. Chief Sharma demonstrated the highest ideals of a service member. When confronted with unprofessional and aggressive behavior, she responded not with emotion, but with discipline. She showed restraint when she had every right to show force. She trusted the system of justice to work, and she provided that system with undeniable proof. The colonel's voice rang across the parade ground. She has taught this command a valuable lesson about what true strength looks like. He turned to face Anna directly. In front of the entire base, the Marine colonel spoke to the Navy chief. On behalf of my command and of the United States Marine Corps, I offer you a formal and public apology for the disgraceful conduct of these Marines. Then he turned his head, looked at Thorne. His voice dropped to a low, dangerous command. Gunnery Sergeant. Render a salute. For a moment, Thorne hesitated, his body rigid with humiliation. Then, under the crushing weight of the colonel's stare and the silent judgment of 1,000 witnesses, he complied. He raised his hand. The salute was mechanically perfect but spiritually broken. It was the salute of a man forced to acknowledge a power he had mocked, a competence he could not comprehend, a strength he had underestimated. Anna met his gaze just for a second. Then she returned the salute, her movements clean, precise, devoid of any hint of triumph. This wasn't victory, this was restoration, order from chaos, balance from imbalance. The formation was dismissed, people dispersed, but something had changed. You could feel it in the way personnel moved, the way they talked, the way they looked at each other. A line had been drawn, a standard had been set, and everyone knew this is who we are. This is who we're supposed to be. Days that followed, the atmosphere around Anna shifted. The whispers stopped, replaced by something else. Respect, deep, unspoken. Marines would nod as she passed. Sailors would step aside in hallways, not out of fear, out of recognition. They were in the presence of someone who had proven something fundamental. That dignity doesn't need to be loud. That strength doesn't need to be aggressive. That sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to be made small. Anna returned to her work. Same desk, same terminal, same problems to solve, signal propagation, encryption protocols, satellite relay timing, the invisible infrastructure that kept modern warfare functioning. She was good at it. She had always been good at it. Now people just knew why. Commander Evans walked up behind her one afternoon, stood watching the elegant flow of data across her screen. Report came in, he said quietly. Drones swarm in the littoral zone, having trouble with signal propagation, too much thermal layering, signal reflection off the seafloor. He slid a data slate onto her desk, the next mission already loading. Anna didn't look up. She simply tapped a control, opened a new window. imported the mission data. The holographic map shifted, displayed the coastline. Red icons blinked where the drones were losing connection. Her mind was already processing, calculating, modeling solutions. "Chief," Commander Evans said. He paused, looked at her. This small, quiet figure who had single-handedly recalibrated an entire base's culture. That was well done. Anna finished typing a command. The satellites overhead began reorienting, focusing tighter beam transmissions. The red icons on her map flickered, started turning green. The problem was already being solved. She still didn't look up, her focus absolute, her purpose clear. The past was a closed file, a completed task. The future was incoming data, a stream of problems waiting for solutions. "Correction achieved," she said, her voice quiet, final, swallowed by the hum of machines. Mission continued. But if you listened closely, if you understood what you were hearing, you'd recognize something profound in those two words. Correction achieved. Not just for the signal propagation problem, not just for the mission, but for something bigger, something that mattered. She had corrected an imbalance, restored dignity to someone who had been told they were worth nothing, proven that size doesn't measure strength, that volume doesn't measure power, that real warriors don't need to announce themselves. They simply act, with precision, with control, with the quiet confidence of someone who knows exactly who they are and exactly what they're capable of. And when the day ends, when the lights go out, when everyone else is asleep, Anna Sharma sits in darkness and feels the weight of water around her even when she's not submerged. The pressure, the cold, the absolute clarity that comes from operating in an environment that doesn't care about anything except your competence. And she knows something that took her years to understand, something she'll never say out loud because it doesn't need to be said. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it doesn't argue, it doesn't fight, it simply acts, with precision, with purpose, with the unshakable certainty that truth, documented and irrefutable, will always rise, like air bubbles in dark water, always, inevitably, up.